So I will call this meeting to order. And we just have to approve our agenda. The three members that are here, pretty much basically the presentation. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second,
I can second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. And approval of the minutes from the January 8th meeting. Could I have a motion to approve? Any discussion on that?
A motion to approve.
Get a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. And we can turn it over to Morgan and Kelsey, who are going to present on the for our AD evaluation. Yay! But I'll introduce myself. Maybe the committee say who they are. We have two other people here that are very helpful. I'm Nicole Wiemeyer, and I've been on the Disability Advisory Committee for a few years. Guys want to say who you are?
Kelly McClintock. I've not been voting. I'm an associate member. I happen to live in Medfield, but I've been involved in this in quite a long time and deeply concerned about it and want to help any way I can.
Kelly just moved to Medfield. He's been here at Sherborn forever.
I can introduce myself. I'm Kevin Stevenson. I recently joined within the last year or so on the advisory committee, and I've been resident of Sherborn for about 5 years now.
Frank?
Okay, I've been in town for quite a long time and on different committees, school committee, etc. And on this one for at least a couple of years, and very interested in proceedings. I do have an interest in what's going to go on as far as this grant's concerned too. Thank you.
And Dave and Jeremy?
I could jump in. This is Dave Welch. I'm with the Recreation Department. We're interested both in accessibility as it relates to our facilities and programs, and are eager to learn more.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy Marcet. I'm the town administrator and ADA coordinator for the town. Happy to help coordinate this grant and help. We're really looking forward to going through this process and also sort of going beyond once we get all the great deliverables from this to continue on making some good actions after. And I'm a Medfield resident, just like Kelly.
We will hold that against you. Okay.
There's almost a quorum of Medfield residents. Thank you all for having us. I am very excited to be here. This is the first ADA self-evaluation and transition project since I've taken over the practice. The Collins Center has done quite a few. My predecessor was a former ADA coordinator for another municipality, and when he left, I took over the practice. I also run the practices of communications, or co-run communications. I run health and human services and community and economic development for the Collins Center, and I've been here for about 3.5 years, and before that I ran a health department in Massachusetts. And I'll have my colleague Kelsey introduce herself, and then I've got some slides to share with you all.
Thanks, Morgan. And it's nice to meet you all. I'm Kelsey Edmond. I've been with the Collins Center a little over 3 years now. I come from academia, so I help with a lot of research needs and data collection and data analysis across the board, across all practice areas, and then specialize more closely with communications and digital accessibility type work. So these projects are really exciting to me and close to my heart as well.
And it's dinner time in my household, so my cats probably will come back and forth behind me in case that made it through the blur. So I'll share our slide deck, and I'm just going to need one moment to get it going. Okay, so As I said, we're so excited to work with Sherborn on this self-evaluation and transition plan, and to work closely with your Disability Advisory Committee on doing it right. And we're really excited to work with Jeremy and other town staff as well, and we'll get to that in a second. So, and Nicole and Jeremy did see a longer version of this slide deck. Don't worry, this is a much more abbreviated version. But we'll go over a little bit about the Collins Center's accessibility practice in general. We'll talk about the project timeline, and then we'll go over an overview of the trainings and deliverables, and then we'd love to hear your questions and thoughts. I think Nicole had given you some pre-homework, which we can discuss at the end. So first off, the Collins Center's approach to the self-evaluation and transition plan projects is to leave the municipal staff, and I'll add disability committees when the client has them, familiar with the concept of accessibility and its many public applications, trained and able to make town offerings and information accessible or offer alternatives, prepared with actionable next steps for improving municipal accessibility, and ready to update or implement accessibility policies after legal review. We're not lawyers, but we're happy to draft policies that you can then share with your legal counsel. So the advantage of working with the Collins Center is you do get tailored trainings and deliverables for your town's needs and abilities. This includes an in-person program access training to engage participants in a full understanding of accessibility. And I'll just pause because I know we have the rec department here. This can be offered to as many of your staff as possible or as you want. If you run a summer camp or summer recreation program, sorry, we don't call them camps, bring them along. Bring whoever you'd like along. And then we also offer virtual digital accessibility training to ensure that communications are compliant with web content accessibility guidelines, as well as just best communication practices. And then we've got vendors who do our facilities and open space audits to guide future capital improvements and upgrades. So what accessibility means in a municipal context, this is how we look at it. Can you enter the building, the office, the room, or travel the path that you need or want to? Can you see, hear, or understand the content or material that you want or need to? Can you participate or attend an event, program, or class that you need or want to in a meaningful way? And if the answers to these questions are no, is there a set process for the town to follow to otherwise provide you with the service? And if the answer is still no, is there a way you can file a grievance? So this gives you an overview of what we'll be doing, because it is an abbreviated timeline, and we know that that is due to the funding source. You're not the only folks who heard about getting funding late November and have to get the project done by June. So we only took on 2 clients this particular period, and so that we can ensure that we give you the best product. So we're going light on the self-evaluation. Jeremy will be getting that from us shortly. Then what we're still figuring out, and we want to work closely with you on, is that public survey, an online public survey to get the public's input. We're aiming to leave that open and for a long period of time. We haven't had great input in past projects with these online surveys. So I think the longer we can keep it open, the better. Send multiple reminders, even possibly have a slide at town meeting where people can scan a QR code. So we'll work with Jeremy and you all on getting the word out about the public survey. Our physical environment audit, I believe, is going to happen in April, but we'll, we just show that it'll happen between these time periods. We're going to have the program access training. I think I have a slide coming up about that. And then you'll get the draft deliverables for comment in June, and the final deliverable as well in time for your grantor. So we understand that your committee does want to participate and help us draft questions for the public survey. We really appreciate that. I think this might be the first time we've had a client with an active disability committee, so it's definitely an advantage here in Sherborn. So we would just ask that you send us your draft questions by Monday, the 24th, though you might at the end of this have questions for us, and we'll take those notes now, but you'll have opportunity to think about this after this meeting as well. And we also want your input on how we get the word out. You know, if you subscribe to local newsletters, if you know that everyone traverses or goes to this one coffee shop and we should get posters there, anything that you think will get the word out, we want to hear that from you as well. And we can talk about that at the end. We only have a few more slides. And then the program access training, we have booked that date. It is April 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And it's appropriate for department heads, for department staff, for committee members like yourselves. What it does is provide an overview of accessibility in the context of municipal government. So that slide I showed with the 5 interlinking circles, it kind of builds on that. And we've got an incredible trainer, Merge Diverse Abilities, Inclusion Consulting. So we'll be working with that trainer on the materials and make sure that everything's appropriate for your folks in Sherborn. And then the digital access training is also open to you and appropriate for any staff that perform public communication functions, whether that's posting or uploading to the website, posting on social media, writing, issuing newsletters, press releases, you name it. So it provides an overview of accessible communications and general best practices in digital accessibility, particularly website and social media. We will offer that sometime after the program access in-person training and May 12th. And that is actually offered by Kelsey, and I should have had her introduce this material. Kelsey, do you want to say anything about this training?
No, I think you covered it. It's really geared towards implementing the website accessibility guidelines into your daily practice. So making sure we're using all the resources of the best practices that already exist and making them part of the culture and the day-to-day work of the town.
Great. And we have been offering this, and by we, I mean Kelsey, training in a lot of different formats, not just for our ADA clients, but like I said, we work on our communications team, and this has been something that we have offered quite a few times before, and clients have told us that it's very useful. So at the end of the project, the town will get a suite of products that are customized for Sherborn's needs, including an executive summary of priorities. And each of these priorities will be divided by whether it's about physical access, communication, or program participation. We will also provide customized user guides and other training materials to be able to apply the concepts after the training, right? It's one of those things where you might get it in the moment, but wait, how did I do that? Or what did Kelsey teach me? Don't worry, we provide all those materials, both in the training and after. We will, if we find out that you need our help drafting policies or procedures, we will draft those for you. And then the physical environment audit reports are pretty lengthy and probably more specific to your public works or facilities departments, but it does outline each deficiency and then, you know, what code or section that applies to this. And then they even try to calculate costs, but that's something that ends up needing a little finessing on the municipal side of things. So that is our slide deck. I'm going to minimize so I can see you all, but we are here to hear your questions, to answer any questions, to hear your thoughts about the survey, etc. Oh, Nicole, do you want to recognize?
I'm sorry.
Oh, do you want to recognize folks or?
Kelly, go ahead.
Yes, at our January meeting, we discussed in quite some length what we might want to ask you and do with this program. And we understood that $50,000 we can run through pretty quickly, and we needed to be careful about priorities. We talked specifically about a survey, and even though We originally had hoped you might guide us on that. Sherborn has had a number of relevant surveys over the past year or two, 3, and we felt that we could probably get the specialized input that we needed on our own. That was a tentative decision. I want to know from others on the committee and from you as to how high a priority a survey might be.
I'll just jump in there first, Kelly. Yeah, that we had discussed that, not knowing how priorities would line up. Jeremy and I met with Morgan, and she felt that we did have sufficient funds to be able to pull together something with their help. You know, like I think kind of a hybrid thing where we can kind of come up with what we want to do. We know a lot of avenues of how to distribute, but we do have I guess we do have the leftover resources to use, like their marketing strategies and expertise on questionnaires, because they're experts in this stuff. They're professionals. So I thought, you know, if I didn't know going into it if we would be able to do all the stuff that we wanted to do with the training, and we talked about the importance that we put on that to make sure that, you know, not only do we have these things listed as to what's needed, but you know, how is staff going to work on getting them in place when needed. And it looks like we can include all of it. So I was pretty psyched about that. Kind of a combined effort. It will require us to kind of come up with our input relatively quickly. And we also talked about even being some room for if anyone else, maybe depending on how many questions we have or what we want to put on it, but we might be able to open it up to even some other the town departments or whatever, or committees that also.
Sorry. So, did I understand, Morgan, that the facilities review would be contracted out? That's not something that you yourselves do?
We have once for a tiny town that had the tiniest budget from their MOD grant. And so we do have a facilities expert. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with the different names in Massachusetts. You wouldn't know that I've lived here my whole life, but it might have been in Medfield that we did this for the senior center. But we prefer to work, this particular architecture firm, KMA, is experts in accessibility. So they do these projects, whether they work for us or, you know, people hire them indirect or directly. But we'd prefer to work with them. It's a better use of core competencies. We got Kelsey. She is a digital access expert. That's what she got her PhD in. And, you know, I do know how to use a tape measure, but I'd rather the experts do it. So yes, we would rather build on our core competencies, especially like as former municipal officials, work with the staff to make sure that they have what they need to give them the tools to be accessible. And then, you know, your public works, your town administrator, your select board, your finance committee, they can all decide, like, once we give them that audit, you know, what their priorities are, and then build that information into their capital planning. And I'll just say about the survey, the ADA requires public input when you do a self-evaluation and transition plan. How you get that public input is up to everyone to figure out. So previously, like this practice I told you I inherited, they've always done an online survey, but the data has been really lacking. Like I said, we would be lucky if we got 10 to 20 responses of towns of any size. So to me, that was an indication that we should probably look at other methods of collecting input and feedback. But given that Sherborn is this like well-educated bedroom community where people are extremely online based on the demographics that we're looking at, it does seem like an online survey might work. But if you were to pair the data collection with maybe another, because I think part of it is like, even the average person doesn't think about, like, even though accessibility affects us all, right? Still, does that word, does that name trigger someone to say, oh, I'm going to fill that survey out? Maybe, maybe not. And that's why we said, well, we do have the room in the budget. We do have the expertise to do this. You might even get better input and data if you do pair with recreation survey or some other project that's happening. And so we are open to that. I know Jeremy's considering it. It's also up to the other departments that might be trying to collect data and whether it fits within their particular schedules as well. But that's why we offered that. And I don't think that any deliverable will be that you'll get less than what you need because we are offering that. Because really, it's just a matter of adding a couple questions. And our online survey software is, you know, we're at a research university, so it's plenty sufficient.
Frank?
Yes, it's my understanding the planning board also received a grant. Did your firm receive that grant for the planning board in Sherborn?
I don't know anything about it, but we generally don't take planning projects because there's a great, we try to fill the holes that like there aren't sufficient consultants in because we're public sector. So it's not familiar to me and it probably would fall under my
Okay, I was just wondering because if it was, it just would seem that if the two have some things that overlap, that you should communicate as far as the survey and some other inquiries. But I guess not. Jeremy, is the planning board getting there's grants from somewhere else?
Yeah, they've got grants from several different sources.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as I understood that, Jeremy, that the timeline I think is quite different between those planning grants for the planning department versus what we're dealing with here, but I could be wrong. I sent the information to Heidi so we could have a follow-up conversation with her. But yeah, if you guys know of any other areas, I know we talked about maybe the open space committee, you know, that has to do with outside spaces, recreation spaces is quite an overlap. So, you know, I think any data is helpful to them too.
Even if we didn't overlap with some other survey, I think the timing is pretty opportune with town meeting. You know, you're gonna have your survey open during town meeting. We want to better well publicize it at that event. This could be something they do as they're sitting watching town meeting. Definitely want to get the information out to our council on aging, you know, get it on their link, get it out on their email distribution list. So, you know, even if it's just your survey, I think we can get it out such that hopefully we get a good response.
Yeah, I think we can.
And I'll also add that, like I said, we're only doing 2 of these projects right now. And the other client said that he had some great ideas for just reframing the posters. And so we're working on that right now. And anything that we build for them, we can bring over to you, right? Like our communications package for this survey, we pretty much just repackage. So that was really helpful input for just like selling the survey. So we're working on that at the moment. So we're excited about that opportunity as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can really push some marketing about how, you know, disability affects, I don't know what, my son has a disability. He just gave a speech on the history of disability movement. He, in his speech, said what percentage of people will have, like 80% of people will have a disability at some point in their lifetime, whether it's a temporary or a permanent one. So, but, you know, there's other factors here. It's all about accessibility. So there's all different types of stages in your life when you're facing different accessibility issues. So I think to every audience, you know, whether it's even the younger families in town and through the school system, working to get their input. There's a CPAC committee there, Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, and as well as just you know, families general. I think we can find a way to get a really good response. I'll just text everybody I know. So it's not that big of a town.
So Nicole, one thought I had in listening to talking about the different email distributions, the four I had in mind off the top of my head, and there may be others. Certainly, Recreation has a broad distribution list for our programming, registration events, things of that nature. COA has certainly their own. I think someone already mentioned that one. I believe the town has a distribution list, although I'm not quite sure what it encompasses. And then you mentioned, Pine Hill School to the parents. And so obviously there's overlap. But if anyone else is like me, sometimes you need to see something a few times before you take action on it. I think sometimes repetition's helpful, even if it is, ultimately the same thing. You may get it in a few different places.
Yeah, if I could, I'm sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention there have been 2 townwide surveys in recent years that are relevant to this, and I didn't know if you had seen them or if it would help for you to see what happened. One was the Council on Aging, and one was the Open Space Committee jointly with a nonprofit that does outdoor stuff.
Do send them along. We love data in all its forms. So we typically, for these projects, haven't really asked for other plans or survey results. But I think that I like I said, these are my first ones where I'm running it, and Kelsey and I think there's no such thing as irrelevant data for these. So do send them along, and we'll take a look and see what we can get for them. Thank you.
Yeah, so far all these ideas sound way better than my idea of standing outside the Dunkin' Donuts and telling people about it. But my general question would be, is you mentioned earlier, sometimes you do the surveys and you get like 10 responses. Is there some sort of like minimum threshold of response that you would really need to develop an accurate or I was what term I'm looking for, a meaningful action plan?
Statistically
And if you
significant. Yeah.
yeah, and if you lack some of that input, what other tools are at your disposal? Do you look at what other towns have done, what their needs are locally, more locally? I'm just, like we're all like hoping for the best, significant data collection. But if that doesn't happen, what happens to fill that gap?
It's that data really informs the self-evaluation, which as I said earlier, we're trying to go lighter on self-evaluations. You'll see some of our competitors and even our prior products, they're hundreds of pages of telling a community what they're doing wrong and very little on how to do things right. And before you all approached us, when I took over, I met with MOD and said, as a former municipal official, I can't stand the idea of these unemailable deliverables. Like they're so large that we would have to send them in chunks. And then I can't imagine as a former department head that how often I would reference any one of those chunks. So that's all to say that we're trying to really reframe these projects so that no matter what data we collect, your department heads and you as committee members are empowered to be accessible moving forward. So the public input is useful. Like if everyone, even if it's just 10 people, but all of them say that this stairwell is terrifying and it needs to be fixed, that will help us like prioritize and point out to your community like this comes up, it's only 10 out of 10, but it's still 10 people who took the time to take the survey to tell us this stairwell is terrifying. But at the end of the day, like our goal is to really give you all the tools you need and the guidance so that when we're gone, you still have them, so that each document that's uploaded to the website, each program that's offered moving forward has the language of how to like I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word, how to request an accommodation. And then the staff who gets that request for accommodation knows how to meet that accommodation. So the input, however we collected it, the data is useful, but it won't ultimately, you know, the quality of the data is not going to ruin your project. And that said, I don't know your community, but where I live, the dump, well, the transfer station is the place to do outreach.
Yeah.
And so that what you just described is really good methods. Actually, last census, it was the transfer station and our liquor store. So that's where they parked to do our data collection. So like I said, all data is good data. And if Disability Advisory Committee members wanted to hang out at Dunks to tell people about the survey, that is a completely legitimate outreach activity, and we would so appreciate it.
And I'll just jump in and say that we will adapt the data analysis based on our response rate. So if we get hundreds of responses, great, maybe we can extrapolate them and say, you know, report some general trends of your town. But if we just get less than that in a handful and not enough where it would be statistically significant, then we would kind of turn to more of a narrative and report it as more qualitative data and more like case study-esque almost. So to Morgan's point, all data is good data. We'll work with what we've got, and regardless, it will help bolster the rest of the project.
Oh, I just had a question about your previous surveys, or if we could see, if you could send us some examples so that we have something to kind of start with, go off on, get us thinking some more. Can we do that?
Well, it's funny, Nicole. What we have envisioned for our other client is a one question survey, because I feel as if the prior surveys are asking almost too much. And so now we're moving towards the direction of how can your town be more accessible, open-ended, with like a definition of like what we mean by accessible, but really we want people to just provide whatever it means to them. So you don't have to do anything more than that. But if there were specific concerns that you had, then we could highlight them. But yeah, we went the most recent project we closed out just a couple months ago. Kelsey and I really toyed with like, are you reporting for yourself or someone else? And, you know, because like maybe the data would be different, but at the end of the day, we just want to know from the public what works for you and what doesn't. We don't need the specifics of your particular disability. But then again, you know, we're offering this to you because you all said that you have, I mean, again, like I said, this is such a treasure that you have an active and caring disability committee. So if you want other specific questions to be asked, we can build them in, or we can go with our new take of one question to let people just put the information that they want us to know.
I'm definitely in favor of the more simple, open-ended kind of thing rather than the ranking. I don't know about you guys, but I can't rank things. I can't rank 5 things. It's just,
And most people do them on mobile devices, and that functionality is not great. So yes, but again, we're happy to customize this to whatever you want, but that's the direction we're going with our other client. It's just, how can the town be more accessible? And you can, you know, each respondent can tell us what that means to them and what they think. Because I think the other issue with these types of projects is that most people think about the built environment, but not everybody. So someone might come in and think, oh, it's about this ramp, but someone else might say, no, I actually, this this licensing process triggers my PTSD, which I would love to hear. Haven't heard it yet, but you know, there's all kinds of different ways. And so I'd love to not guide that the way someone sees it through the questions we ask.
maybe we could do it in a way where we can tell them what they might want to be thinking about, you know, because I'm afraid if you put it just, what's your problem? It just wouldn't, nobody would be able to think of it, but say, oh, what about when you're in open space, when you're on a trail, when you're in the town, you know, a municipal building, or participating in a program, or going to a meeting, or, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. That would help me, I think, thinking about scenarios and then being able to be like, oh yeah, this is a problem sometimes, or I can see this as a problem. But I agree with you on not having all the statistics. We don't need to know bracket or your disability bracket or anything like that. And that's all information too that's going to change. So I'm with you. Let's not waste anybody's time.
And I'll just share, Nicole, some of the marketing materials that we want to implement will have some of that framing built into it. So yeah, hopefully kind of leading up to the launch of the survey, these types of questions will already be on people's minds.
Cool, great. Any other questions, guys, or thoughts? I mean, we are going to be tasked with deciding on what we want to do in the next week or so, but that's great. I think we might as well just get it over with, get it done.
Just Morgan, another question about the physical facilities. You mentioned tape measures and so forth. And of course, with the recreation and lots of other physical facilities, there are existing fields, buildings, and so forth. Are you okay commenting on unbuilt facilities that have plans, but no construction yet, that are still in the planning stage?
I'm thinking back to the last presentation we gave to on a deliverable. The architects talked about how moving forward, you want to make sure that accessibility is baked in from the jump, right? You would rather, catch that ramp being built at the wrong incline thousands of dollars before it's built, right?
Yes.
So right now it's not included in your scope, and the scope is definitely like we're at capacity for the project. But that said, we can get and because I saw our architect sub vendor do this at our last presentation, we can include in that executive summary some tips on how to bake it in. I'm blanking on what those were, and that's why I'll bring, I can just make sure that's included in the executive summary, but it was just basically at review, before, theoretically, I'm sorry, I'm getting caught up here, but
explain the question just a
okay.
bit more. Sherborn has no outdoor accessible gathering space anywhere near the town center. And there is a plan which has been worked on for quite some time to construct such a facility with a pavilion right near the town center. It's got, I understand, a fairly good plan so far, but getting your comments on the construction, the plans would be very helpful.
I don't have the inventory of facilities that the audit includes, but I believe the space around the pavilion Nicole did call out. I'm seeing Nicole nod her head. Yeah, but what I was tripping on saying is that, I mean, if any plans are designed to current building code, they should be compliant with ADA law, right? But we know that this doesn't always happen. So we can include some recommended steps, prior to permitting, during permitting, and that's what I heard our vendor do for our last presentation. So that's an easy build it into the executive summary. But it did, I am hearing and seeing nodding that we are including that space. And then, and the good news is plans for a pavilion are a lot less complex than for a public safety building or a library, right? That should be an easier compliance. But we know the whole reason why this practice exists is because things can still get built without proper accessibility. So we'll help you with some tips for how to ensure that gets built the right way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the not just the pavilion, but also the paths planned around, I think the whole perimeter, but making sure that they really have Council,
Nicole, you're breaking up.
oh, sorry. Just making sure that our public paths around that leading to like where the Council on Aging is, leading to the different areas in town that have populations that might want to come, just that kind of thing.
Great.
Wayfinding, accessible wayfinding is such an issue. We know this. So we'll do our best to, include it in the tips in the executive summary. And I believe the area was called out for the physical audit.
Great. Any other thoughts from anybody else? I think this is a really great plan. I'm just so excited that it includes the training and the ongoing and the how do we approach any issues that come up in the future. Because you're right. I mean, I've looked at some of these reports and they're over 100 pages, and I don't even know if they involved any training whatsoever or for the future. So I think it's going to be fantastic.
We think so too. Thank you so much for bringing us on. Thank you for, serving your town in this capacity. We know that there's lots of different ways you can spend your Wednesday evenings, but we are so happy that you are doing this and that you brought us on, and we're happy to help you get Sherborn to be slightly more accessible, if not completely more accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll head off. Thanks so much. Thanks, Kels.
Thank you all. Bye.
I know.
Okay. So do we want to have a brief debrief, I guess, on what we've heard and what we think?
It's good.
Yeah, I felt really good listening to her ever since I started talking to her back in December.
So will we be receiving some things from them for us to work on or jog our minds or something, or what's the next step?
It sounded like they don't want to share stuff that was previous that they don't think worked very well, but I'll see what I'll talk to her again tomorrow on an email and see what I can get.
Okay.
Is it possible that like we could add those timelines into the minutes, or are we just gonna be kind of curious to see them again, and also just to make sure we're mindful as we continue to meet that we meet on a monthly basis, and that timeline looks pretty aggressive. So I think it's kind of a good idea maybe to make sure we're on top of that. We're discussing the next steps prior to our next meeting.
Yes. I, of course, can't. The presentation was very much to the point and fairly simple. And I'm sure it would be easy for her to give us those slides to include in the record. Could you ask her, Nicola?
Yeah.
And I'll hold the minutes until they come and they'll be a part of it.
Can we do that? Can we attach slides to the minutes? That's pretty cool.
Well, we can attach them in paper. I mean,
yeah. Right. Okay. Right. We want to put that timeline in. You're right. And
since this was recorded, we can go back and look at it too on the recording too, if we needed to.
much easier if she just sent it to us.
It would be. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll ask her for the time slides tomorrow.
Can I also say I think I love the idea that like it could be as simple as one question. Then if they do kind of her advice, but I don't know if I'm gonna have somebody stand in front of the Dunkin' Donuts or wherever it might be. If it's one question, like having that public outreach by having a physical presence somewhere, maybe if they're accepting the idea of like having a tablet or something that people would just go in, like, hey, you have a few minutes, you want to fill this out, might be a great way to get a response, especially if it's just one question.
As far as the open-ended questions, I remember our earlier discussions about a survey, and that the three of you were very much urging fewer open-ended questions too, and see what comes in. I
just don't know how they analyze. That's that's the beauty of actually them saying this is how they prefer to do it, because they have the tools to do the analysis. If we were doing that on our own and with open-ended questions, that's really difficult, I think.
So like I'm thinking about what I do in my work, like with AI technology and looking for common words and themes. You know, they can make quick work of it these days. I think, and if it's only 10 respondents, it's pretty quick work. But even with more responses, you know, being able to go through and quickly recognize common words, themes, ideas. I mean, that's kind of what AI does really well.
That's true. That's true. That's very true. I definitely think we can get more than 10 because I think we've got persistent committee and even you know, one thing we didn't mention, but there's on social media, I'm in a couple of Sherborn Facebook sites. I don't do Instagram. I hardly do Facebook, but I do go on to promote things like this. And I've had good responses before. So I know that a lot of the Sherborn, you know, community that it's targeted to, and they're different ones for different people, it does get the word out. So I think if anything, they're just going to get sick of hearing from me in all different avenues, but that's okay. I'll risk.
You might be able to use Nextdoor to ask people to respond too.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Nextdoor has its good points and its bad. I've used it. And I guess we want to be open to all sorts of, seems like to me Nextdoor has just become so negative, and but maybe that's what we need too, you know?
Well, you know, it's the typical thing. I think negative opinions tend to get more vocalized because people want to share their views. But I agree. Let's see what they advise as far as like outreach programs, whether it's like in person, at a public place, social media. I'm sure they have other ideas that are obvious to them, but like we're not thinking of, and kind of see what we can do with this. I think we get way more than 10 responses, and go for what we can get.
I mean, if it's one question too, like, you know, or one or two or three questions, it should be easy to like you said, get some kind of, like, I'm just envisioning, I don't even know if they do this anymore, but Pine Hill used to have a pickup line, you know, and you have to sit there and wait for your child to be released or something. We could just walk down that line and be like, you don't have to talk to him, but hit this QR code and just answer this one question. And that would be a lot of people right there. So I think we just have to, you know, decide on what we want to do. So I'll put it out in an email tomorrow to you guys, and think about it some more, and think about it being completely not, you know, just saying, what do you, it just, if it's so general, people might just automatically think about just going into town hall or something like that. I just want them to open their minds. But I see what Kelsey was saying. She's going to have marketing things where we can go out and say, hey, did you ever consider this as a, you know, accessibility issue? Or do you ever look at it from this point of view? I think that will get people's minds going. But if they don't see any of that stuff, I just want to make sure that people are thinking about all.
Yeah, I think that's one of those scenarios where like the more people that can respond or add information, the more likely common themes are to rise to the top on that as well. So like that would help sort of solve the context problem of where we're getting or how we're asking the question. But you know, I think that we can ask their advice on that as well. Like, you know, how many questions is too many questions? I think most people could probably drive by and do like a quick one question answer and just say, I hate lines or whatever it might be. And, you know, give that response. So I love the low burden of that.
But using town meeting is also a great idea. It
Yeah.
might take some thought on how to do that best. But a lot of people just sitting there.
Yeah, no, we talked about it, Jeremy and Morgan and I, and you can put up at the beginning of the meeting or even at an intermission or whatever, the QR code, people can hold their phone up to it. It'll go right to the survey. And I went to a garden club meeting, and the presenter had QR codes for different things. You know, she was selling her book, and people would just put up there and be like, okay, I'll just order her book. It was so simple and easy. And and you're a captive audience. So, yeah. And, you know, while you're in the town meeting, you might even be thinking about how it affected you for accessibility, and maybe, you know, maybe the sound system, maybe um, the the crowds, or having the space that you need for certain disabilities. You know, I don't know. It definitely would be triggered going there. Okay. Any other thoughts, or should we wrap this up? I'll send out an email and kind of get you guys thinking, and we'll have a deadline set in place. Maybe we'll have to have another meeting. Do you think we'll have to have another meeting before we get back to her? She said, what, the 24th? So maybe we should.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea if you want to keep the momentum going here, and we've got some tight timelines to use this grant to like maybe meet again outside our normal schedule if people are agreeable to it.
Nicole, do you mean the usual time, the usual day in March? Or,
Well, she needs the input from us for the survey, if we just, you know, want to give them more input, by February 24th.
oh,
Oh,
Our next-
okay.
Yeah.
Next
wow,
fall. So this is like, as in maybe next week even.
geez.
They don't waste any time.
Could anybody do next, if we just did it following Wednesday at 5?
Yeah,
Yeah, Karen, I think so.
I could do it.
Okay, good. That'll, let's plan that as our next meeting. I'll get an agenda out, and we'll just say, finalize what we want to give them as our,
you might immediately notify Kathy. Kathy and Dave Colleen, because they're not here and they wouldn't know anything about this.
yep. I'll give them a recap. I'll write up something tonight, a little recap, and the fact that we need to move forward, and that we'd like to have a meeting next week, and hope they can make it. And what was do you guys remember the specific wording she said for the question? There's just like, where do you see the need for accessibility changes in town? Or do you have any concerns about accessibility? I can't remember how she said it.
Ugh.
I would just reach out to her and say, like, give us like several examples of questions you might ask, and then we can when we meet next week, we can determine which question we think would be most appropriate. I mean, I'm sure they have experience about like the question itself can elicit responses, right? So I'm sure they have experience about what's an effective question in that space.
Okay. I'll bop that over there. And then if I get that information back to you guys in the next couple of days, I will send that out to you, and then we'll plan on meeting next Wednesday. I mean, that's all that I guess our involvement will be trying to get the people to respond, which I think is a valid thing for our committee to do. But other than that, I think a lot of this is going to move on without us, you know, even being involved. So we'll think
This
of,
is where you say for $50,000, they should do it, right?
yeah.
Well, if Morgan was talking about a response rate of 10, or, I mean, that's pathetic. Council on Aging got, I can't remember if it was 200 or 300. The Forest and Trail Association townwide survey got the same thing. It's 200.
I would say that's probably pretty good. I mean, like, I think surveys are notoriously low response kind of things, but I think that's why they probably asked us to like anything we can think of to get it out there is going to be key to get a response. Because we just drop it on the town website, yeah, 10 responses is
Oh,
probably
no,
all.
not just on the website, but
Yeah, I mean, like that's why I gotta get it out there.
And the COA link is a really good instrument too, is if there was a place in there to say where people could call or go online or email their response to a certain question, because that goes to everybody.
Oh, you mean the newsletter?
Yes, and that's usually
Oh,
very well
yes.
done.
Mhm.
It is. Yeah, I read it too. Okay, that's a great idea.
Nicole, you're not old enough to read it.
Hey,
That might be the only problem, is some people think they aren't old enough to read it, but if we could just sort of encourage, because it goes to everybody, and they're paying to send it out. It's a shame not to have more people just the COA use it.
yeah. What is the age limit for going to those meetings?
Not really. I don't think there's any age limit actually. Nicole.
I'm
I
gonna go-
think, yeah, and actually the link has some good information for all ages. It's not solely
Hmm.
senior stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I had to tune out for a sec. I got a call from somebody doing an investigation for us. And I've got to head over to the middle school now for a presentation. So I'm gonna peel
Oh,
off. If that's
yeah.
okay.
Decided that we're going to meet next week. When I don't know if you heard that, Jeremy, but and in the meantime, I'll send out an email with information to the members that weren't here, and also to see if they can make it next Wednesday, but just to kind of get people's feedback so we can kind of put in our 2 cents for the survey. Okay, so I think we can have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second.
Great.
Six on the button.
Cool. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye,
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.